Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. And if you're watching this on YouTube or on our Patreon, I have our lovely logo behind me. But actually, it's a very special episode, so I have to change my background because this is a gay and lesbian review fall episode, end of fall episode. And I am joined with the esteemed editor-in-chief and founder, Richard Schneider Jr. There you go. Got to get the junior part out there, Richard. So, Richard, welcome to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room.
Thank you so much.
Well, first, before we just dig into exciting, literature that you have out there, I have my lovely November and December issue in front of me. I know you have a 30th anniversary book coming out soon. Before all of that, I just wanted to ask, as the founder, how many years has it been that you created the Gay and Lesbian Review?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question because we're about to celebrate our 30th anniversary. The first issue was winter 1994. That was back when we were quarterly, and so that's why it was winter. We are now bi-monthly, so our 30th birthday will be celebrated with the January-February issue. But instead of having an issue, we're actually going to replace it with a book. We've done that before on special occasions. And so this will be actually the third time that we've published a book in lieu of an issue. And it's kind of a retrospective. You'll probably ask me about it more later, but just to give a quick little overview, the concept is that we're looking back over 30 years. And so we have this wonderful artist named Charles Heffling. And so this is actually part two of a book of his wonderful illustrations, accompanied by some brief-ish passages that are from past issues that give a little summation of the various individuals, LGBT people who we're showing, whose illustration is being presented from Charles Heffling. And so that's what's upcoming in our January, February issue. So long way of answering. We've been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah. So if you're currently a subscriber like myself and you and Steven is Richard's partner. Is that the right terminology, Richard?
Actually, he's my husband.
Your
No,
husband. Okay.
we
I'm
got married
very
about a year
careful.
ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been together actually for 24 and some odd years, but we got married just last year in let's see, 2022. And so, and his name is Stephen Hemrick. He's the publisher of the magazine, and yeah, we're married now.
Yeah. So what I think is so fascinating is not only happy 30 years, I also am just curious, what is a major distinction between that first issue compared to, the beautiful magazine that I now hold in my hands from
I can
November
show
and
you.
December?
Hang on, I can
So you
show
actually
you.
have the first issue.
Yes, right
Oh,
here.
wow.
We have all of the issues are here. So because I think it is actually very revealing. So it was all in black and white. It's just
Oh,
this very
wow.
simple design. Um, and it was 32 pages long, I
Oh,
think.
and it's called the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Review,
Yeah,
too.
back then it was, yes, we were the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Review for our first 6 years or so. And after that period, in the year 2000, I think our very first issue of the millennium, of the new millennium, we changed our name. We dropped the Harvard and became just the Gay and Lesbian Review. And we added Worldwide, which we don't use all that much, but officially our name is the Gay and Lesbian Review Worldwide. And we've been using G&LR because it's old fashioned. I realize gay and lesbian it's too exclusionary. So we try to just say G&LR and go by letters, kind of the way the NAACP does. It's like you have a name that's kind of from a different era, but if you just reduce it to the letters, somehow it doesn't
Mhm.
sound so bad.
Yeah, well, and we're the ITBR. So, yeah, acronyms are enjoyable.
Yeah, the
And
ITBR. Yes, that's
yeah,
a good one.
and for everyone out there, I actually had Martha E. Stone, the literary editor of G&LR, has been on the podcast, so you all can listen to that episode from the spring. And she gave us so many recommendations of what to look forward to in the summer. Um, has there been a major difference after Harvard no longer had was it an ownership, Richard, or they had some kind of say in it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the magazine grows out of a actually newsletter from an alumni organization called the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Caucus, and I was the editor of the newsletter for many years,
Uh,
starting sometime in the '80s. And I had this kind of this this great grand idea that we would just start. It was actually just going to be annual at first, but it would be called the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Review, which kind of drew out sort of in a natural way from the Harvard Gay and Lesbian newsletter. And that then it very quickly became a quarterly magazine, and it very quickly outgrew Harvard in the sense that we were now distributing not just to our alumni, but to people across the country. And so that continued for a number of years. But Harvard did come to us in, I think, 1999 and said, we love the magazine and we understand you came by the name honestly because it is an alumni organization, but you really don't have an official affiliation with the university. So, in order to continue using the name Harvard, you'd have to get a school or a department to sponsor you with a
mm.
faculty sponsor. And so we thought, well, we could do that. We could try to do that. But you know what? Um, we're happy not using the name Harvard. We've kind of outgrown that at this point. So we gladly dropped Harvard in that year. And then, as I said, in 2000, we started with our new name, and we've been bi-monthly with just the name, the Gay and Lesbian Review, ever since.
Well, so it must have also given you a type of entrepreneurial creative freedom in a way, I'm assuming, to like not have to be beholden to a university's department, which might object to certain articles or could object to certain contributors. Like you'd have to go through a rigmarole in a way.
It would have been a cumbersome process, and they probably would have wanted it to be like a refereed journal, which
Mhm.
it's not. It's a magazine, and we've always called it a magazine. And so, yeah, I would have lost all kinds of editorial control, and I don't even know what the implications would be. We thought about it for maybe 8 minutes total before rejecting the idea and saying no, that's fine. Actually, it turned out for the better, really, because a lot of times we would go to like the old outright conferences and various expos, and people would come up to us and say, "Oh, sorry, I don't have a Harvard affiliation, so I can't subscribe." And so we had to explain to people, no, 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 you don't need a Harvard affiliation. It's called the Harvard Gay. So actually, we felt like we did better once we dropped the name, because then people realized, look, this is for everybody, or certainly everybody who's interested in LGBT issues. And so that worked out quite well, I think.
Well, and now you're also, here in the podcasting space with me. I love, amplifying the G&LR, having you as an official sponsor. But you also had William Kaiser had done a special podcast. So if everyone searched Gay and Lesbian Review right now on Apple or Spotify podcasts, they would find, do you remember, Richard, what that special podcast is that William did?
It was
That like
called Popular.
you
Popular, it's called.
popular.
You can look for
Okay.
it that way.
Yeah.
Simple title, much more complicated podcast than the title would indicate, because it was kind of about Washington, D.C. and being gay there, and this little experiment that he did. Could he become one of the popular people in the LGBT world? What would it take, and what would it mean to be,
Mhm.
popular? So he was kind of
Yeah.
exploring this idea of, I don't know, reputation and popularity, and how that works in the gay world. I say the gay world because it probably is kind of a gay male world that he was dealing with, because he was going out to the clubs and stuff. So I think this is one time when we can be forgiven for just saying it was kind of a gay oriented podcast.
Well, and it was such an anthropological study. Like I really urge everyone out there to listen because William, like you said, Richard, takes us on his underground clubbing type journey through DC,
Yeah,
and its corridors of all this homoerotic and just erotic energy. So
yeah,
it was so enjoyable. But like what I love now, Richard, is that the Gay and Lesbian Review, so many who I get to chat with who are LGBTQ writers, podcasters, media figures, they all are starting to follow you on social media. On the GL Review is your Instagram channel, or not channel, but your Instagram tag. And they're following your profile. And they said to me, they just love, most of them are actually getting the physical copy, but they love, like I do, just getting it in the mail. There's something so nostalgic. And I feel that my millennial generation and Gen Zers really want that experience again, right? Like digital, and you do have a digital edition, right? I don't want to not say you do, because they have an amazing digital edition with back issues. Um, but there is something so beautiful of just how curated the magazine still is. Like just the illustrations. And I think maybe this goes into your 30th special 30th anniversary book, which is these beautiful caricatured images that Charles had done, right? Or still does.
He still does them for us. Yes,
Mhm.
no, it's all true. I mean, that's good to hear because we certainly are trying to reach out to a broader readership. And the fact that people of your generation are still interested in reading a hard copy magazine is good news. Um, because many publications, as you know, have simply gone online or abandoned hard copy, and there is perhaps something a little nostalgic. I think that's a nice way of putting it. You could say it's retro,
Mhm.
or it's just a fossil, depending upon how you want to look at it. But we've kept it going for all this time, and we've found that despite predictions that we wouldn't be able to endure for much longer as a hard copy magazine, we have. So so far so good. We have no plans to go digital exclusively, although, as you say, we do have a digital edition,
Mhm.
and we would love people to subscribe to that because we think that's kind of our future. But oddly enough, the digital edition hasn't taken off as much as we would expect or like. So anybody who wants to subscribe to the digital edition, it's exactly like the magazine itself, except you only see it online. You see it on your iPad or your Kindle or whatever device you use.
Well, and even Scott Alexander Hess, who's been on our Queer as Folk, or is about to be, I don't think it's out yet, but he recapped a Queer as Folk episode from 2000 with me, because like we have that series on our podcast. So I bring on these queer male, and of course, I think you and Steven recapping one would be a really comedic experience. So I'll have to get you on that in the future. But like what I love is like then I saw he had a Here's My Story about his new novel, A Season in Delhi. Um, I saw Matt Baum, who's been on my podcast. His book, Hi Honey, I'm Homo, is actually in the November and December issue reviewed. So I think Manuel Betancourt, who I've had on. So it's wonderful to see
Really? Oh, wow.
how all of your Eric Marcus was just on the show in the summer with Making Gay History. Of course, Andrew Lear is one of your contributors, the
Yeah,
classic
he's also
queer
my
classic
closest
scholar.
friend. He's also probably my closest friend.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, we're very tight. He's in Europe now. He's actually coming home very soon. We're having lunch tomorrow. So he's
Yeah.
probably in a plane right now, um, coming back for after a very long time in Europe. But that's great to hear that all those people. Yeah, I love that title. Hi, honey, I'm homo. It's about
Yes.
sitcoms.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
and I the title I gave that piece was "As Sitcom Goes, So Goes the Nation."
Mm.
Um, because I really think that in many ways sitcoms do sort of reflect the zeitgeist of the country in many ways. So, and our good friend Andrew Holleran just did a review of Will and Grace. There's a new book on Will and Grace that's just out. It kind of
Mhm.
as a phenomenon. So that's another major article that we have about a sitcom, um, and and again this the kind of cultural significance
Mm.
of that as a phenomenon, but also as maybe a change agent to the extent that Will and Grace did, I think, open people's eyes, and for at least some people made it okay to be LGBT. And it was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool show in some ways.
Well, and it has the iconic gay best friend. I don't know if you know Nicholas Di Domizio, but he's a novelist and he came on to discuss his new novel, The Gay Best Friend. And we played this whole like game that I did with him about iconic gay best friends from TV shows, films. And Will and Grace really does have a staying power. I agree with you,
Yeah,
Richard. But what's interesting is we've gone away from the sitcom world. I'm not sure if this is where Andrew Holler and I have to read that article, but we're now really in reality TV universe. And I'm wondering, is that just because of social media, um, influencers, TikTok, attention spans are shorter? People kind of want to see reality reflected, even though reality TV is not reality, but that's a whole other conversation about producers and they have to create narratives.
it
Do
is a
you
different
think
conversation.
yeah, like, do you think that those who contribute to do reviews for TV and film, has there been a real change right now? Like, where do you see TV and film when it comes to the queer community?
TV and film. I mean, every once in a while, a movie comes along like Brokeback Mountain, or Call Me by Your Name that breaks through and gets watched by a mass audience, or at least a lot of people. But other than that, I think it's still pretty ghettoized.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, like we just saw um, this just a few days ago. We saw this crazy movie called Dix the Musical
Oh,
with
yes, yes,
Rimby.
yes. I wanted to see that.
It's funny. It's
Is it
campy.
good?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, it's not a serious movie. It's kind of a
Mhm.
silly movie, but it's campy, good fun. But it's just an example of, I think, one of many movies that will only be seen by an LGBT audience. I, I mean that's the way I see it. Is it's great that we have our own movies, and it's great that people go and see them or rent them, or so that it's been going for quite a few years now. I think we've had a constant stream of LGBT films, um, but I think we're still kind of in our own little ghetto in many ways. For what
Yeah,
that's
I
worth,
I have to watch that now. I'm like, I need to add Dix to the list. But I do think there's a movie coming out in December during the Christmas season that's going to really cause a queer female wave, which is great. The Color Purple musical.
oh wow, as a movie,
Yes, so it's now an adaptation of the musical. Um, so redoing it for film, but Whoopi Goldberg's behind it, Oprah. So it's kind of like the same team that was behind the original Color Purple film
oh cool.
coming back for the musical.
The musical, a musical version of it. Well, I guess you can make a musical out of almost anything. It's really
Yeah, I
incredible.
I
What is
did
it?
see it on Broadway. It's very good.
Oh, it's very,
The musical.
okay.
Yeah.
Another thing too, I mean, another thing which I think is just about kind of LGBT representation is that I think in many movies now, especially in rom-coms, or movies, maybe not action adventure movies, which are directed to teenage boys, but movies that are sort of for a more general or broader audience, I think there usually is at least one LGBT character. It seems that it's almost de rigueur to have a best friend or maybe a second best friend, or so that I think there's a sensitivity which did not exist, let's say 20 years ago, um, that yeah, I mean we're part of the world, we're part of the community, and there there is often a feeling that there should be some kind of LGBT representation even in movies that are basically straight or pitched to a mainstream audience.
And I think streaming services are actually doing an excellent job. In my opinion, Richard, this is just my hat because TV is just less expensive to produce and you have more options with your streaming venues where you can option the rights for a TV show. That there's so many LGBTQ characters, like you said, intersected and placed into narratives. Like I'm watching The Fall of the House of Usher, and that's a really queer show right now. There's
Hmm,
The Gilded Age has come back for its second season, and there's queer male storylines. Downton Abbey had a queer storyline.
that's interesting. There was
So
also
yeah.
there was that series with Neil Patrick Harris called Uncoupled, which
Mm.
was again one of those. I mean, Stephen and I have gotten really into those series, which I'm not a TV person and I don't watch much primetime TV, but some of those series are really good. They're addictive and they're just really well done. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Uncoupled was all that special. We reviewed it in the magazine, and I think the reviewer liked it. And well, what's not to like? It was funny. It was kind of light. In fact, I think they're coming back for another season. I think
Oh,
I read.
good.
Yeah,
I'll
because I
have
think
to watch it.
yeah,
Yeah.
they've had 2 seasons so far, and we're still wondering whether Neil Patrick Harris is going to get back together with his boyfriend, whose name I forget. But I mean, we've been just like working our way through the marvelous Mrs. Maisel,
Oh,
and
so good.
it's not at all gay, but
No, but it's campy. I
it's
mean,
campy in its own way. Yes, it is,
yeah.
and it's a great series. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I love popular culture actually. It's curious that we're talking about it because people think that we're sort of like, ooh, we're very sort of snooty magazine and we're very
Mm.
serious. And actually, I think popular culture is really important. I mean, I think it's very important that we present ourselves in on TV and in movies and in popular books and you name it, just to remind the general public that we're here, we're queer, get used to it, right?
And we're not going away.
We're
Yeah.
not going away as we
Well,
used
and
to.
that's why your review section is so robust. Like if I just look, I mean, we mentioned Matt Baum's work, but this novel that I've really wanted to read, American Scholar by Patrick E. Horrigan. Um, Passages, there's a film by Ira Sachs is the director. Emma Donohue's Learned by Heart. A Hill to Doolittle um work, and then Gays on Broadway. I mean, I lit up at that because I'm just a Broadway musical aficionado, so I like any new queer book that enters the scene. So how do all that was something I wanted to ask, since you are the editor-in-chief, Richard. I can put you in the hot seat, which is, how do these reviews make their way? Are they, like we're talking about, are they things in pop culture that you're just drawn to, or are they pitched to you by contributors?
Oh, well, okay. I mean, we have a process actually. That's easy because we actually have a fairly well worked out process, at least in the sense that it works. We have a literary editor named Martha Stone, who you've interviewed,
Yeah, yeah.
and maybe she already explained this process to you. So, briefly, a lot of publishers of LGBT books send them to us. So
Mhm.
we end up with like a stack of maybe 75 books that Martha and I go through once every 2 months. I mean, we probably should do it more often, but we get together for like, the better part of a day, which usually has lunch in the middle. And we spend that day just going through these 75 books. And we usually boil it down to about 25 books. These are the books that we would like to review. And we call that our targeted list.
Mm.
We then have a stable of reviewers, which is almost 100 at this point. Some of them review in just about every single issue. Like there are a few maybe who do so. More often they come and go, like, they'll review once or twice a year. But if you add it all together, we have, I think, a very strong group of people who have been, in many cases, they've been with us for a long time. And so they will receive a newsletter that has this targeted list of books. And then they will select what book they would like to review. Sometimes they'll give just ones like, I really, really just want this one review or this one book to review. Or here's a list of 3 or 4 books that I could review. So then I take those and I sort of adjudicate. I try to figure out what are the best matches. Obviously, I'm looking for skill sets and who's like who do I think would be the best person? Because there's always a lot of overlap. Sometimes there's a feeding frenzy for one particular book that everybody wants. Like if it's like a really famous writer, like I don't know, Oscar Wilde is always really popular. So if there's a new book about Oscar Wilde, you know that at least a half a dozen people are going to claim that book. So I have to kind of make a lot of decisions at that point and allocate the book selections to make everybody happy and to make me happy in the sense that, sort of the best person for the best job or the best book. And that's how they get assigned. And so then I just let people know and we send the books out, just physically because we have them all here. Like right behind me actually is their stacks. They come in, they stack up. And then they usually have about 2 months to read the book and send me the review. And with any luck, they will actually do so. Not everyone does. A fair number of times, somebody will say, you know what, I thought this would be a good book, but I'm really not loving it. So in those cases, I'll just say, okay, they will try to reassign
Yeah.
it or just forget about it.
Well, and using myself as a hypothetical, kind of, but like say I said to you, just because anyone listening right now, they might be thinking, I mean, I'm about to, Richard, in the winter, I'm going to see Dracula, which is this queer male campy musical on Broadway, off
Oh,
Broadway, technically. But say I was like, oh my, I really have to, this is a conversation starter. I need to review it, or I need to review The Color Purple, or I have to review Fellow Travelers, a new series right now with Jonathan Bailey from Bridgerton. He's from Bridgerton, but he's with Matt Bomer, and they're this gay male
yeah.
couple. You might have heard of it with J. Edgar
Well, I've heard it's
Hoover,
great. I've heard it's really good. Fellow traveler,
Fellow Travelers.
travelers.
So,
Yes.
like, how does that work in the case of someone out there who's inspired by queer art that they're consuming? The Fall of the
Well,
House of Usher,
well,
even.
we are totally open to people coming to us. In other words, it's not just exclusively done by that process I described, where we assign a
Mhm.
book, but especially because you mentioned a lot of like movies and series and various other things. And since we don't really have that same kind of process in place, it's great when people come to us with a proposal. If we're, books too, fine. If we miss a book, especially that somehow or other slips through our fingers, yes. But if it's a play, an art museum, an art exhibition, or a musical
Mhm.
event or album, we have like kind of a music critic, Colin Carmen, who does those reviews and sometimes movies. So yes, we absolutely encourage people to come to us with proposals.
And what should they do in that case, Richard? Like they have a proposal in mind. Should they email Stephen, for example?
No, just come right to me, email me.
Okay.
I mean, it will pass through Stephen's hands because it comes to, I use an AOL address, HGLR at AOL.com. I'm very old fashioned, but I also have an address, which is just my name, Richard Schneider, at gmail.org, I guess it is. And that's just go to our website and and under submissions and you'll see that how that works. And then so people often will send a proposal, and then of course I have to think about it. That's kind of what I do. I would say, I don't know if most people know exactly what an editor does. Like,
Mhm.
it's not just about going through line by line and fixing people's grammar. It's much more about the selection process and curating, figuring out what are we going to feature in our next issue, and what books are we going to review, what movies are we going to review. So there's always like a lot of decision making and back and forth, and sometimes persuasion, and sometimes I'll say, dude, you're really going to have to persuade me on this one because I don't know. I'm just not too sure about it. And so then they'll work on me sometimes, and eventually we come to some kind of agreement. Sometimes we agree, well, maybe not, but yeah, it's an interactive process.
Well, so everyone out there, go to submissions on G, it's glreview.org.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. So the overall website is exactly glreview.org. And then you'll find it's a good website, I think. I have very little to do with it, so I can say that we have a web editor, and Stephen kind of manages, and then we have a webmaster who takes care of the technical side of things. But you'll find all kinds of stuff there, including sort of an archive, which has a lot of material since we've been in business for such a long, long time. I think our archive goes back to only 2003, but that's still 20 years.
wow.
And do the math times like six issues per year times X
Yeah.
number of articles per issue. So there's a lot of stuff on our
Well, you'll
website.
have something to read uh, every day from the Gay and Lesbian Review. But something that you've brought up that you've kind of touched it, but I am curious about process with you have such an intimate relationship with, say, an Andrew Holleran. I saw that first issue. from
Yes, he's our first,
1994, and
he's our
he's
first,
there.
and he's still
He's
here. He's still
well,
with us.
and you must establish a real connection and intimacy with these contributors in terms of their creative process. So I'm sure, like when they are writing essays or they're doing reviews, what's it been like, Richard, to see how that is a kernel that actually starts to grow into their own projects? Like, have you seen it inspire their own work?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that about that's really rewarding about this job is that, I mean, someone like Andrew Holland is a complete pro. I mean, he's such a great writer. I mean, far be it from me to try to, teach him anything about writing. He's taught me a lot, actually, and the fact that he's been with us right from the very start. He really is. It was really Andrew in many ways who made the magazine possible by letting us publish that long memoir that he did and lending his name as a famous person, kind of a very well-known novelist, was really important to kind of establish us as a real thing. So I have to, give us, even reinforce what you said about Andrew Holleran's importance to the magazine. Other people have come, they've come along. I'm happy to say that there are people that started with us and got their start maybe right out of college and are no longer writing for us because they've gone on to bigger and better things. And there are bigger and better things. I mean, someone like Adam Feldman, he was just
Mhm.
fresh out of Harvard, I think, when he started writing for us. And he's like the editor or he's at least I think he's the theatrical editor of Time Out New York, which is huge. I mean, so I always look to him and I say, wow, he got his start with us, really. So I've seen lots of growth and development, and if I have played my own small part in nurturing their talent and their writing, I would like to think of that as part of my job that's very rewarding.
And what I love is um, you really have described that you've created every magazine, every issue is an arc. Like it really is telling a story. That's your job as an editor in chief. So, for example, in November and December, the title, the theme, Notes from Underground, it takes its illusion from Dostoevsky's novella.
Right.
So, how do I'm just curious, how do you come up with the theme or like where is it once you see everything in front of you, it becomes almost like creating an overture in a Broadway musical. You can't create an overture without the songs.
Yeah, it's sort of driven by what I have in hand.
Hmm.
So somebody will submit something and that will give me an idea. I wonder if I could create an issue around that idea or that theme. And so then I start to announce it. And we have a page. I'll do something. I don't know again if how well this works to hold something up, but we have something called the cultural calendar. And in the cultural calendar, it's this. It kind of looks like this, and it's colorful. And it one thing that it includes is an announcement of upcoming themes. And so sometimes people will see that and they'll respond and they will say, oh, okay, that seems like something that I'd like to write about. But very often the theme just kind of, I don't know, gels, or I just look at what I've got in front of me and I say, oh, okay. Now I have to admit, like Notes from Underground is a little bit of I cheated a little bit on that one because the term underground can mean different things. Like, for example, so you have first of all this guy. Um, let's see. Um, you've got this guy. Well, first of all, you've got listed Fassbinder, Werner Fassbinder, and he is sort of underground in the sense that he was considered an underground filmmaker who wasn't part of the studio system. So he was kind of like, that kind of underground. Then you have like Georges Eekhoud, and he was a Dutch writer who wrote a book called A Strange Love way back in 1899. And it was
Hmm.
really quite shocking for its time because it's clearly gay. It's clearly about same-sex physical contact. It's not pornographic because you could only say so much, but it's quite clear what he was up to. So that's underground in the sense that it was it had limited distribution, and it was kind of just one of those naughty books that got published and read probably by a handful of people. Then you've got like another way of being underground is this woman um, who whose name is Gertrude. I'm trying to remember her full name, Sandman. Gertrude
Mm.
Sandman survived the Nazi regime in Germany by going underground in a different sense of the word. She was protected by her friends. She lived in Berlin. Even while the Nazis were destroying her work, she was an artist. They were just, even while they were sort of trying to wipe out her artwork,
Mm.
she was essentially wiping out her identity so that the Nazis didn't find her. She survived and lived to a ripe old age, right in Berlin, as Jewish and lesbian, as an artist. Um, it was quite an amazing story. So she kind of was underground in that sense. Then you've got Mark Olmsted, who wrote a wonderful book called Ink from the Pen, which is about his year-long experience in the LA County prison system. It was for drugs. It happened quite a number of years ago, but he kept a diary. He's a writer. He's a wonderful writer. And the book itself, I would recommend. It's called Ink from the Pen, once again. And he describes what it was like to be a gay, HIV positive dude in the LA County prison system. And the article is called Prison and Privilege because what he discovered was that there's this very complex social structure in prison that places you into a category or a set of overlapping categories. It's very intersectional because being gay is one thing, and being straight, um, being Hispanic, being Black, being white. It was almost like the three-way division. And that puts you in a different position in the prison system. And there's all kinds of different rules. Like in some ways, being gay is bad because you're sort of, for all the reasons that being gay can be bad for various people throughout history. But it can also be advantageous to be gay. You can get certain privileges and you can get removed from kind of the mainstream and taken away from a really dangerous part of the jail. So that was interesting. So as I say, that's notes from underground. I think is an interesting theme, but it was in that case it was a little bit contrived in the sense that because the word underground is being used in a number of different ways.
But it's such a symbolic interpretation, and it works so well with the way you've just laid and mapped out all of these articles, Richard. I think that, you know, I love your high intellect and, you know, how in depth you are with this conversation, but I'm going to get a little gossipy, which is just my question is, how do you navigate because you are a magazine and you are a review magazine? How have you navigated the artists themselves? Like, has there ever been, it's almost like when Jesse Green interview reviews theater for New York City in the New York Times. Like he's been on the show and I've talked with him a lot about how he kind of has to keep this distance. Like because if you get too close to the subject, it can bias your review in theater. Do you feel though that because the contributors really are coming to you with their knowledge or just their passion, you don't really have to worry so much about how an artist or a creator is perceived from a review that's written?
Well, I'm very careful about. I mean, I think there are a number of questions there, but I think I'm very careful about trying to keep a kind of wall of separation between a reviewer and the work being reviewed. So, and I'm always a little alarmed. It happens quite frequently that somebody will say that, "Oh, I was in touch with the author of this book who I may or may not know, but who sent me a copy of their book." And that already I'm a little nervous because that means you've already had some kind of interaction with the author. And I really do think it's important to have as much objectivity as possible, and therefore as much distance as possible. So to the extent that I'm able as the editor to sort of like keep a sort of separation between the reviewer and the author or the director or whatever, I do it. I think that's important. And I really, I don't like it when, I particularly don't like it when authors of a book come to me and recommend somebody who they think could review their book.
Oh,
Um, I think that's inappropriate. So obviously, no, that's not going to happen because you already sort of hand select. If you, as the author of the book, have already kind of hand picked that person who you think is going to be um, a good reviewer, maybe they would be a good reviewer, but it seems there's already a kind of bias. You've chosen them because you think they'll give you a good review. Now, I would say most reviews probably are favorable, but certainly not all. I mean, there certainly are some reviews that are either lukewarm or quite unfavorable. And when a reviewer comes to me and says, I don't really like this book very much. I think I would have to give it a bad review. So what should I do? I'll say, give it a bad review. I mean, you have to be honest. You have to call it the way you know. And sometimes people will just say, look, I feel very uncomfortable doing that. So I'm going to withdraw. Okay, fine. I can't force you. But I will always tell people, that's what a review is. A review is supposed to be a dispassionate appraisal of a book that will enable readers to make a judgment as to whether they want to buy that book and read that
yeah.
book.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you've never really had to worry about the creator themselves banging down your door.
Oh,
And
I always have to worry about that. Oh no, it's like going back to Andrew Holleran said right from the so you're going to be a lightning rod if you do this, and if it works, you will be a lightning rod because of course writers have egos. You spend a huge amount of time. People don't realize how, well, of course they do. Writing a book is quite a hard thing to do. It's a major investment, and of course you've poured
Mhm.
yourself into it. So people have a lot invested in their work, whether it's a book or a movie or anything else. And so there are sensitivities, and people are going to get upset if they don't like the way their book was reviewed, and they particularly might get upset if a book is passed over if we don't review a book. I do my best to cover as many books as we possibly can, but of course we can't cover them all. So there's always that. But I think you're also hinting at a question about the exact interaction or the interaction that I have with
Mm.
others. And does that sometimes get testy or heated or difficult? And the answer is, of course, yeah, of course it does. Um, I'm a pretty hands-on editor. I mean, I when somebody turns something in, I always go through very carefully. And the range can be from, okay, that's almost perfect. I have almost no changes, maybe a comma here or there, just things to get us up to G&LR style, all the way to, fairly thoroughgoing rewrite on my part in some cases. And so when you do that, and I always tell people, look, I do the least that I think I have to. And I always run it by. I will never just publish something without getting complete permission from the writer to make sure that they're okay with it. But there's a process. Sometimes people are, a little upset about the way I edited something, or they think I went overboard, or they didn't like that I cut something. And it's almost always amicable, and I am always willing to negotiate. And I will usually do if it's really important to the writer, I will almost always take that seriously. But there's a negotiation process. And of course, there have been some, knockdown, drag out fights where I didn't talk to somebody or they didn't talk to me for 5 years or,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yes, that has happened on a few occasions. But I will say in almost all cases, we make up and eventually everything is fine. But that's what you'd expect really in this business. It's, you know, um, different people have different feelings. Um, and so it just comes with the territory.
Well, and I think like as we're nearing the end, something that I just find so refreshing about what even drew me to the Gay and Lesbian Review and allows me to be here with you, Richard, full circle, is something that I just value, which is free speech, which is um, being so individualized with our ideas, our authenticity. So even like when you wrote a piece about politics and Biden and like exposing right-wing conservatives and how they're using transgender um individuals as scapegoats, it shows me that you as the editor in chief, you're able to take on a certain vulnerability with your own beliefs. Like you're okay to be out there. Is that something I'm assuming that you really value in the magazine, is that each writer, including yourself, has their free speech and their own values represented, that they're not going to be censored?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, of course, I value range of I mean I don't push any particular ideology. I mean, obviously I'm politically liberal. Of course, I'm Democrat. I mean, I have to just be honest about that. I think it would be surprising if I were not, and I think probably that describes most of our writers and most of our readers. I mean, it's just like which party and which type of ideology has been favorable to LGBT rights and freedoms and promoting our lives and helping us, and which party and which ideology has been stopping us and throwing up barriers every step of the way. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. But I certainly don't. But within that sort of broad range that I think we all expect us. I will not publish something that is anti-LGBT. Put it that way. I mean, we have a policy right from the very beginning.
Mhm.
We don't necessarily want to present. We're not Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm just presenting a completely favorable Shangri-La version of LGBT life. We want to deal with social problems as well. But we're not going to publish anything that's sort of like homophobic or anti-LGBT.
Mhm. Wait, does that ever actually get presented your way, Richard?
Mm, every once in a while, yeah. Every once in a while, somebody will come, and it's always written kind of slyly, so that between the line, it takes a little reading between the lines to realize, oh, they're basically um, they're basically trying to undermine LGBT rights in a way that's not as direct as, let's say, people on the Christian right are constantly doing.
They're
But
not Marjorie Taylor Greene, for
not
example.
much. But yeah, but every once in a while, yeah, something comes along. You made a reference earlier, I think, to or you didn't specifically mention my BTW column, but I think something you said kind of reminded me of a little blurb that's in the current issue. This is kind of like pulled from the news type column where
Mhm.
I look for interesting um, little little stories that might have been missed, that may or may not be the most important thing that's happening in the news, but have bearing on LGBT rights and life. And in many cases, there's like a certain irony or a certain weirdness to the story, which appeals to me for whatever reason. So I do that column and in every issue. It's called BTW, and usually there's like 5 or 6 of these little squibs, which I spend a lot of time on because I try to make them sort of clever, and in some cases they're funny. I hope, at least they're supposed to be. Um, so that's where
Well,
that's
yeah.
where I
And
present my
there's
politics, let's say, and a lot of them are about like the Christian right, because I'm not, or especially like evangelical Christians. The hard Christian right is definitely not our friend. So a lot of the articles are sort of exposing those people who are dealing with their shenanigans.
yeah. Well, and one example is what I had seen circulating too, but that um like Christian right protest, there's a Biden sucks sign, and like
That's a
the father's
scream.
sons are holding it, and there's the cock on full display with Biden's face on the head of the
On the head of
penis,
the
on the
penis.
glands, I guess.
Yeah, the glands, yeah. And
And then like the sperm
it's
coming
ejaculating.
out says my kids.
My
So like
kid
I'm not.
with an arrow, with a helpful arrow pointing up. I know. And this guy claims that this is somehow supposed to promote his anti-transgender agenda. And so what I point out is like, how? I mean, what is the, find the fit. How is that in any way related to a transgender agenda? Um, uh, by the way, the sign is 16 feet long. Your listeners cannot see that, but it is. And it's very, very long. And above the penis, it says Biden sucks. And as you say, it has other little weird things written on it. Yeah, it's like, what's he thinking? I don't.
Yeah,
That's a
well, what and isn't it? It's also a really queer themes like male oral sex meets fellatio meets
yeah.
orgasm meets
I know.
um I guess my children came from this act of pleasure and Biden, you know, submitted to having a cock in his mouth. I don't know. There's a lot going
What's
on
going
there,
on there? I
Richard.
know. I'd say Freud would have a field day with this. I don't know what he would say exactly, but and then it seems that he's anti-trans and he's to protect the children from trans, but he's also into this idea of grooming, which I don't know where this idea. What are they talking about? That these like as you say, Marjorie Taylor Greene and those types are constantly talking about grooming, which whatever that is. And so apparently this guy is into that, and I wonder, is that somehow the key to understanding, or should we just assume this guy's an idiot, or he's just a weird pervert who felt like doing a 16-foot penis under the rubric of being anti-trans?
And is imagining himself on his knees. I think he might be
This
wanting
guy,
to be on his knees in front of that 16-foot penis. But
I think so
uh
too. I
this
think this.
definitely is going to be on our social media, Richard, because I need to show this image to everyone. But
Yes, yes, you have to
I
show that
am
image.
curious though, like just to wrap up, I love your though BTW section. So by the way, I'm assuming that's what the
Oh yeah, it
acronym.
just means
Okay, okay, okay.
it was cute. It was kind of back. I started that back in 2001, and back then it was sort of clever BTW, by the way. And I started, well, that's exactly what this is, or by the wayside. So that's, yeah, that's where that comes from.
Yeah, not on the boiler plate, but it's in the ether. So have politics, has there been a shift from in these 30 years? Like, do you feel that the content now is more open, or has it always, you feel the Pulse has always been very open with all these different topics over these 30 years?
Oh, well, things have changed a lot. I mean, certainly to go back to 1994, we were still like in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. There was a huge amount of homophobia. There were very few protections. There certainly wasn't same-sex marriage. So we've made some progress. I mean, as bad as things seem right now, they haven't managed to take too much away from us. Although there are obviously people who would love to take everything away from us if they possibly could. I think the magazine now is, if anything, less political because there because many things have kind of issues have been settled. We now can serve in the military. We have same-sex marriage. We have, before the current Supreme Court, we got some good rulings which provided some workplace protection. And so as long as those things stay in place, there's no guarantee, I think our focus has changed. And I think the magazine is really a lot about history and biography at this point. And I don't want it to become just sort of archival. And I'm always aware of that possible danger that we're so focused on the past and people and LGBT people from the past. We did over the summer an issue that was devoted to kind of like new media. So, which, and I think it was really good that we were able to talk about the world of gay oriented video games and uh,
I think you had
different
comic books.
comic books
Hmm.
and fanzine type stories, um, and and there was also an article on Grinder,
Hmm.
um, is something that is an important part of our culture. I think it's something that we can talk about as however you feel about it. I think it's you know it's the way guys meet each other now. Let's
Hmm.
face it, along with Scruff and maybe one or two others.
Yeah.
I grew up and came out in a world of gay bars, and that was it. And it's now a different world, but that's fine. And that's something that, we look, and that's something that we have looked at a lot because certainly the media, mass media, social media, Grinder, etc., have had a great impact on our culture and are very
Yeah.
central to our culture now.
And this is why we need to like have your contributors dissect, analyze, um, and explore these phenomenons.
Yeah,
So, Richard, I can't wait to have more people out there have the gay and lesbian review either physically in front of them in this tactile way or their eyes on their screen exploring the digital edition. I can't wait to see the 30th anniversary illustrations.
yeah,
So
and
is that, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Oh well, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so that the 30th anniversary book, which will replace the January February 2024 issue, as I mentioned, will be called Outer Appearances. And the reason for that is that, so this, again, I'm going to hold something up. This is the book that, this is kind of part one of Charles Heffling. So this one was called Casual Outings. These are like historical figures that um, that were sort of closeted, and so we're outing them, but in a casual way. So that's why it was called Casual Outings. And these are mostly like so-called high culture.
Mhm.
And the next book is more about popular culture figures. And so
I
and
think I
they
saw Madonna.
yeah, and so they're mostly out. I think it was, you might have seen Melissa Etheridge and thought it was Madonna, because I
Oh,
don't think I don't think Madonna's actually in it, but Melissa Etheridge is, and a lot of so-called popular figures, and so it's called Outer Appearance because they're outer than the first group in the sense
yes,
of
yes, yes, yes.
more out, and outer appearances. I don't know. It kind of works as, I like wordplay, and
I,
so
well, yeah, you're
but
all about the
I'm all
words,
about
which,
words. So
yes,
absolutely.
yes, yes.
So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in as a little pitch so that people will be on the lookout
Wait,
for our
so
next
if
book.
people are subscribing, they automatically receive this 30th anniversary book.
Yes, yes,
Oh, excellent, Richard.
yeah. So they get that, and there will also be a small supplement that will have book reviews and some ads and things. We do accept advertising, which is an important part of our deal. I should also mention we're a nonprofit organization, since I didn't mention that, and we accept donations, which are a very important part of our survival. Um,
Yes. The
yeah,
Friends of the GNLR.
friends of the G&LR.
There is a whole section, Friends of the Review. Yes. So
Yeah,
shout
so
out to the Friends of the Review.
yeah, they're like really critical for us, and we have lots of them. We've been amazed at how people are very generous, and we get tax deductible contributions.
Great.
And so then advertising, I mentioned. But yes, the next issue is going to be basically a book that will replace the issue, and it will be called Outer Appearances.
Well, and it's exciting because it's literally going to happen in the new year. So, or might arrive like right,
With
after the
any luck,
holiday season.
with any luck, yes, it'll come out right around there, end of December.
So it's a, belated stocking stuffer
Yeah,
of sorts.
there
So
you go.
everyone remember, use our promo code ITBR50 and you get 50% off your digital or print subscription when you go on to glreview.org.
Okay.
So, you know, I I'm so excited that more people are going to have their eyes on. I mean, it's just there was a video I just released, Richard, um, shouting out the gay and lesbian review, but also there was this quote that I had about how one book, I mean, it's a trite quote, but like it makes sense to us cozy readers. Like one book leads to another mention, and then you're on a rabbit hole search. And I feel that the gay and lesbian review is such an amazing example of that. Like one review leads you to 10 works, or
Okay.
one article leads you to 20 exhibits.
Yeah,
It's
that's great.
that's what I love about magazines.
I
Um,
love magazines. I do. I have to admit, it's to the extent to the point that I almost don't read as many books as I should because I get so many magazines.
but you get a lot of uh quick synopses and summaries, so it's a different type of digestion.
It appeals to my
Uh,
dilettantism. I'm sort of that's like most editors. I'm kind of a dilettante. I have to be interested in everything, all over the place. And the idea of just focusing on one thing is, well, it's good. I mean, I admire people who can do that. But
yeah, I know I always feel guilty, but I'm stopping that guilt when I like am only focused on one work. I mean, my dissertation was a focus, so
what
that's
was your
out there now.
what was your dissertation?
It's on ancient Greek mythology in Walt Whitman, and how Walt Whitman, I argue, created a queer male procreative um, theory. And every male writer or reader after Whitman would see his poems and the ancient Greek myth as an opening of understanding male same-sex desire without the language of sexuality in
Wow,
his historical time. So I
wow,
do mention Oscar Wilde at the end.
that sounds
Like
great.
that's where I would pick it up. Oh, thank you,
Yeah,
Richard. It's
sounds
called
really interesting.
Thank you. It's called The
Love that.
Pool of Narcissus, Walt Whitman's male homoerotic poetics.
Wow.
Um,
I mean, I love Walt
so
Whitman. I love the
yeah.
ancient Greeks. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah. Well, like you, I needed that wordplay of not only the pool literally of Narcissus, but Greek myth pooling us as
Okay.
queer male readers.
Right.
So yeah, I'm currently optioning it for a publisher, an academic publisher. So I'm writing a book proposal.
Oh, good for
Um,
you. Good luck with that.
yes,
I'm
getting that
sure.
energy out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good luck.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, yeah. You'll hear updates, don't worry.
Okay.
And I'd love
Excellent.
for you to come back again, like maybe, in the summer and just talk about, what to expect in the summer and give us all an
Yeah,
update. I just
sure.
love these conversations. Yeah,
I would love
maybe
to
we'll
do
even
that.
have to
It's
get
been great.
Martha back. We'll need to get Martha and Steven on with you too. Maybe it'll be
What do
you all.
you ever do like
Yeah.
panels, like a panel discussion, like a group?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we can definitely do a group panel. I think that would be
Okay.
great.
Yeah, maybe that would
And,
be.
now that I'm doing a business meeting, but everyone listening in the audience can hear our business meeting, if ever there's someone who does a review for you and you want to put them in touch, um, there was a film, a TV show, or especially a film or a TV show, I'd love to
Okay.
have them on and we'll like, mention the G&LR review, but also recap that TV show or film. I think that would be a great fun, informal discussion.
Okay. Sounds good.
So Richard Schneider, everyone, editor in chief and founder of G&LR, the Gay and Lesbian Review. Make sure you get your hands on glreview.org. You can get your print or your digital subscription. Use the code ITBR50 for 50% off. And look forward to the 30th anniversary illustrated book that will replace the January and February issue. I think I got it, Richard. Anything else you
Yeah.
want to promote?
Oh, that's it. I think you got it all. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for
Of course.
mentioning all that. And I hope your listeners will take heart, take heed, and check us out.
Great. And Instagram at the GL Review. Uh, so thank you, Richard, and bye to everyone out there. Happy holidays. You know, Thanksgiving, when this comes out, it will almost be here. And then, the cozy holiday. I can almost hear the sleigh bells jingling around. And I'm already going crazy with all my gingerbread peppermint. I love it. Every season, Richard, I'm like, Actually, that's not true. The spring is less exciting for me, but the summer, the fall, the winter has a lot of enjoyable scents. The spring needs to step it up a little.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, work on that.
I think they need to, yeah, you need to talk to spring, Richard.
I
Okay.
love the spring. All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you so much,
Thank
Andrew.
you, Richard. Okay. Bye to everyone out there.
Bye.